Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Wednesday everybody. First up, the outbreak situation in the capital has worsened over the last 24 hours. Nervous officials race to stamp out cases in the sensitive city as the country approaches the even more sensitive 20th Party Congress. With national travel restrictions in place in dozens of cities already in varying forms of lockdowns, authorities will not hesitate to lock down large parts of Beijing if they feel they need to in order to achieve zero COVID policy. Indeed, tightening restrictions are already causing disruptions. As we discussed yesterday, the local government announced on Monday that employees and students must show a negative COVID-19 test taken within the previous 48 hours in order to return to work or school the following day. Yesterday, Tuesday, commuters in the capital city found that subway gates would not open because of COVID-19 test verification issues. During the rush hour, subway staff were forced to manually check hundreds of thousands of commuter tests, causing pandemonium, in the words of one commuter. In the last 24 hours, infections have been found in universities and in a hospital. On top of this, Sanhe, which borders Beijing, has gone into 4 days of lockdowns and mass testing. Meanwhile, China just had its Mid-Autumn Festival over the weekend. We find it useful to look at spending over these holiday periods, a good proxy for consumer confidence in the economy generally. According to the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, in an official announcement published yesterday, Tuesday, domestic tourism generated 28.7 billion RMB, $4.2 billion of spending during the 3-day public holiday period, down 22.8% from the same period last year, when the country was also seeing sporadic lockdowns and outbreaks, and a whopping 39.4% from 2019. Before the pandemic. We can see why Beijing is so concerned about weak consumption and low consumer confidence. Holidays are also typically periods which see bumps in housing sales, but not this year. According to a note published by China Index Academy yesterday, during the 3-day holiday period, new home sales in 34 surveyed cities fell 31.6% by floor space year on year, with the think tank expressing in an accompanying commentary, quote, "Potential home buyers still lack confidence in a property market beset by mortgage boycotts on pre-sold apartments and repeated COVID-19 lockdowns." End quote. And while we're touching on the housing crisis, Evergrande has pledged to resume construction on all remaining stalled property projects by the end of this month, as government pressure is put on the developer to pacify a nationwide mortgage boycott. In a statement on Monday evening local time, the company vowed that it would restart construction on 38 projects by September 30th, with 668 other stalled projects now resumed too. Of course, as we have been following for the last few weeks now, local governments, through carrots and sticks, and in some cases de facto nationalization, have been forcing crisis-hit major developers to finish stalled projects in order to prevent the mortgage boycott from spreading. In Zhengzhou, for example, builders have been directed to sell assets and land use rights. Financing platforms have also been set up by the municipal government to deal with short-term liquidity constraints. $29 billion worth of special loans from the central government to ensure stalled apartments are completed is also on the way. Indeed, Evergrande is actively applying for these special purpose loans and working with state-owned builders, according to Chinese financial outlet 21st Century Business Herald. Now, we remember that all these government measures are to ensure pre-sold unfinished projects are completed. It does not come close to stabilizing the wider financial market or housing prices. The slow-moving housing crisis continues to unfold. Okay, next up, Taiwan. In Washington, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee is about to vote on a bill that would finance weapons exports to Taiwan for the first time ever, representing yet another serious shakeup in American Taiwan policy in recent months. The so-called Taiwan Policy Act contains dozens of measures intended to increase Taipei's security and deterrence capacity, providing Taiwan with $4.5 billion in weapons and security assistance over the next 4 years, in addition to a $2 billion loan facility to help Taiwan buy more weapons and make it eligible for a war reserve stockpile program. Interestingly, too, the law would force the White House to impose sanctions on critical Chinese financial actors in the event of, quote, escalating hostile actions in or against Taiwan, end quote. The proposed law also includes largely symbolic measures which, though result in little practical effects, are the features most likely to anger Beijing, for example, formally designating Taiwan as a major non-NATO ally. These provisions would have been unthinkable a year ago. However, as Washington lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have expressed in recent days, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, combined with Beijing's muscular response to Pelosi's Taipei trip, have changed the calculus regarding America's Taiwan policy. Some analysts warn, however, that the law could further escalate US-China tensions. Quote, if the bill passes in its current form, we're really in for a major crisis. China will feel compelled to respond very strongly because it feels that if it doesn't, Congress will do more and more, and the executive branch will do nothing to stop it. End quote. The Chinese embassy in Washington unsurprisingly condemned the proposed law as, quote, extremely egregious, end quote. If the bill passes the Senate Foreign Relations Panel, it goes to a vote in the full Senate and then to the House. Meanwhile, in another recent China-focused exclusive, UK-based Reuters reports yesterday that the United States is, quote, considering options for a sanctions package against China to deter it from invading Taiwan, with the European Union coming under diplomatic pressure from Taipei to do the same. End quote. The piece, which relies on unnamed sources, argues that the deliberations in Washington and Taipei's separate lobbying of EU envoys were both at an early stage. Quote, a response to fears of a Chinese invasion which have grown as military tensions escalate in the Taiwan Strait. End quote. One source expressed to the outlet that US talks over sanctions began after Russia invaded Ukraine in February, but took on fresh urgency after the Chinese reaction to Pelosi's visit. Analysts are still debating what exactly the US could do in terms of economic deterrence. Quote, I'm not sure what the US could threaten that would change Xi's calculus about Taiwan. I think the PRC policymakers learned a lot from the sanctions packages against Russia and have been doing everything they can to harden their system to reduce the effect of any possible US sanctions. But the fact that these discussions are underway will only harden attitudes towards the US. We are in a very dangerous negative feedback loop for which there are no obvious breakers. End quote. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. And as always, anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help keep China Update sustainable, if you like what I'm trying to do here with China Update and would like to help me continue making these videos for you guys every day, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Last up, this is a new development which we need to keep our eyes on. Bloomberg's Hong Kong team writes that Beijing regulators have told China's biggest banks and state-owned firms to start a round of checks on their financial exposure to Fosun in Mandarin, one of the country's largest non-state conglomerates. Multiple regulators, including China's banking watchdog and the local commission that oversees state investments in Beijing, recently told institutions under their oversight to closely examine their exposure to the massive conglomerate. Of course, this is a very bad sign for the company, and the market agrees, with dollar bonds guaranteed by Fosun International Limited dropping as much as 9 cents yesterday after the news, and shares crashing to their lowest point in a decade, dropping 10% in trading today, down 55% year on year. Fosun International Limited is now trying to calm concerned investors, expressing in an official statement yesterday that the regulator's notice was a routine request for information. Fosun is a big player in China, with some analysts suspecting that perhaps regulators now fear that this could be the next whale to fall in the Chinese system, and that they are trying to reduce systemic risk, especially in the financial system, which is already dealing with big enough issues as it is, before this collapse or fall happens. But this company has its fingers in a lot of pies. Quote, Fosun has invested in a huge number of businesses, from real estate development and tourism to pharmaceuticals and consumer products. Investor concern about its debts have mounted amid slowing economic growth and a sluggish property market in China. End quote. At the end of June this year, Fosun's liability to asset ratio rose to 76.7% from 74.8% at the end of last year. Short-term borrowings jumped 29% over the same period. First half net profits fell 32.8% year-on-year. Fosun's longer-dated bonds are now trading at below 60 cents on the dollar, levels which typically signal distress. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.